Okay, sorry this is going up a bit late. But tomorrow, the day after this video, is my niece's wedding. And as I mentioned earlier in the week in that video, I'm involved in getting everything ready for the wedding. So we were getting the reception space all decorated this morning, and we have the rehearsal tonight and a few other things that I'm still involved in. So I'll get this recorded and we'll see how quickly I can get it up after that. So, chapter 11,063. 1163. I broke myself of that. Now I'm doing it again. 1163, titled Promises. So, we're done with the Yamato cover page story, and we're starting to get more of the art requests and stuff like that, or just Oda having fun. So we have Luffy running around and just doing parkour all over the place with a pack of Japanese macaques. For anyone wondering, Japanese macaques are, yes, generally the monkeys and stuff like that you see that will go into hot springs, that you see like sitting in hot springs. By the way, those little effers are dangerous. Do not try to pet any of them. There is a video by another YouTuber that I watched called LivingZoo, who also has another channel called LivingZoo, that goes through, and he has a whole video about macaques, and I'm going to put it in the comment section or in the description here. And if you want, you can go and read it or watch his video, because he can make these things pretty scary. So we have Luffy jumping around, doing parkour with the monkeys, which is adorable. Just around a random city. Then we just go to Emu, who's just not doing parkour, who is possessing Saturn and is just destroying God Valley all around them. Is the beginning of the chapter. Pretty much right where we left off the last time. Emu has possessed Saturn, and we see a bunch of the Marines are all looking up at this, and they know that it's Saturn. And they're like, what is this form? This is an ability? And so they're very confused about this. So this kind of confirms that at some point in time, once you're a high enough rank Marine or so, it is explained to you that, okay, you know the Gorosei? Yeah. Okay, so they have demonic transformations that they can turn into, and only certain levels of people are allowed to actually see them. Seems to be the case here. We saw that at Egghead, where it was, I think it was everyone who's like a vice admiral or below a vice admiral or something like that had to leave the island, probably because any just residual haki, conqueror's haki, other types of whatever coming off of the Gorosei would just kill them, I guess, because they just don't have enough power to withstand it. So we have this thing just rampaging through and just indiscriminately attacking all of them. So Emu is like looking down at them from like where he is possessing Saturn. It's like such eyesores. And then just like picks up Saturn's leg that we know is like very poisonous and is spider form, and just starts randomly stabbing all of the Marines. It's like, these are your own men. Emu and Saturn do not care, as has been very much explained to us. The Gorosei and Emu view just anybody who is not them essentially as insects. Some of them are more useful insects, some of them are more interesting and entertaining insects, depending on stuff, but they're insects. They are pretty insignificant to them. So kind of like the whole kind of scenario here is that essentially the world government, specifically Emu and the Gorosei, and to a degree the other celestial dragons, because of how they view everybody, they view them as like, oh, they're not a threat. Not a problem. Not anything that we need to worry about. We'll just get rid of them at some point in time. They're entertaining for us, but not so much. So Emu is just indiscriminately killing the Marines there and also killing the pirates. And we see some of the other just random pirates are just like, it's going after the Marines, isn't it on their side? And it's just like, scratch that. Looks like it has it out for all of us. So a bunch of them are getting attacked as well. It's just some of the random pirates running away trying to get the treasure. We see another random Marine. Everybody fall back, just trying to get as many of their troops out of the firing line as possible. It's like, keep your distance. Attacking is prohibited, and do not attack this thing. Secure the escape route instead. So, getting the other celestial dragons off the island is their main priority. And we cut to Roger, who is looking down at several of his crew members who unfortunately got hurt in this part of this. And he's just like, hey, get a hold of yourselves. And it's just like, this pain is oddly compelling, is like what one of them is saying. It's oddly compelling. I'm like, how is pain compelling? That's odd. And it's just like, what are you babbling about, dummy? And it's just like, damn it, my crew's been... And Roger's like, Gabon, cover these guys. Carry the treasure and get out of here. And he's like... And Gabon is just like holding his axe just like over his shoulder. He's just like, not this again. You... Just don't do anything crazy, okay? This is... Okay, so as we see later on the random island where we have about 12 years from this, 10 years from this, where we have Roger and Whitebeard, where their group ends up, where their two crews interact and everything. Like, Roger's just like, fun, just running off to go and, fight against Whitebeard. And just to have fun is how they feel. And, like, Rayleigh and Scopper at that point in time are just like, yeah, there he is again. Yeah, okay, let's go clean up his mess. At this point in time, they've probably kind of figured that out, and they're like, come on, boss, you really got to not do that. And then it's just like, yes, whatever, just go. So, and then we cut to Garp, who is grabbing one of the other random Marines, and it's just like, what the hell is that freaky monster? And the Marine is just like, no idea, just Saint Saturn just transformed. So this proves that, Garp knew about the Gorosei. Okay, so depending on what's going on here, either certain ones were aware of what was going on and they saw Saturn transform, so they know not to attack him. Garp maybe didn't know that at that point in time. So, and Garp is kind of like one of those other Marines. Him and to a degree Sengoku and Otsuru were kind of some of the Marines that were like, okay, maybe these ones we don't want to have when we have our, human hunting contest. Maybe we don't want them around. They kind of can't be beat into submission as much as we would like for the Marines to be, like the way that Kizaru will be later on. And Garp's just like, one of the 5 elders, huh? This is my first time seeing one. As in, like, seeing a 5 elder. I don't think you'd want to try to have an audience with a 5 elder. That doesn't sound like a fun thing, in my opinion. And he's just like, what a fitting look for the head of those maggots. And the other Marines are just like, Vice Admiral, keep it down, please stop. So I love how it's like the celestial dragons and the Gorosei and Emu specifically view the humans as insects. And then Garp, I love this, or at least in the translation, is calling them maggots, which is just perfect. And the other Marines are just like, maybe don't say that out loud. Please don't say that. We don't need to get killed. So Emu Spider Saturn is making his way to where Rox is. So he's made his way to Rox, who is just standing there ready to attack. And they're just like, hey, if it isn't the Rat King, came to kill me in person, huh? It's probably going to end up being translated as like King of the Rats or something like that for like how Rox views them. So we have Emu looking down and she's like, thou art the one, Davy Jones. So either this means that Rox looks a lot like how Davy Jones used to look, or he just has a similar enough presence that even at this point in time, it's also just like, and he is a descendant of Davy Jones. He's a member of the Davy clan. And there's still the debate about whether or not Davy Jones and Joy Boy may have been the same person, or maybe they had been allies, or maybe they had even been like, the enemy of my enemy is my ally, or something like that, where like they were both enemies at some point in time, and then they ended up with a mutual enemy who hated both of them as well, so they just worked together. So we're not sure about that. We know they end up being part of the Will of D, but we're not sure exactly how that's going to pan out at the moment. So, and of course, Emu is still all silhouetted, so we don't see what Emu looks like at this point in time. At this point in time, I'm kind of just wanting Emu to just be someone who just is like essentially like an ink blot test. It's like a Rorschach test. Emu's gonna end up looking like whatever the heck you want Emu to look like. We're gonna get like a face reveal and body reveal or whatever of Emu at some point in time, but we don't know when that'll be. Um, so he's just like the descendant of Davy Jones is still standing before Emu in this case. And Rox is just like, afraid you got the wrong guy. I've never met the man. She's like, yeah, but he is your ancestor, so you kind of carry his blood in this case. And we have this image, this shot of Rox looking, of kind of Emu's position looking down at Rox. And Rox is like, that said, I believe promises are meant to be kept. So we know of at least kind of one promise that is in regards to the Void Century, or a couple. One of them is, of course, the promise of the Noah that Joy Boy failed to achieve, where he was going to have the Noah and use it to help get, Neptune, the mermaid princess during the Void Century, get her and her people up to the surface so they could live on the surface like everybody else. That promise was broken. It was left unfulfilled. Hopefully will get fulfilled this time around. And then we also know that when the world government was formed, what became the world government, that there were the 19 kings who each joined and became members of that became the Celestial Dragon families that we still have today in the story, and that each of them like essentially promised, stabbed their swords into around the empty throne where we now know where Emu sits, stabbed their swords into the ground there, and were like, we promise never to rebel against you. Made that promise. And there's I believe it has been confirmed that there are only 19 swords on that first platform where the empty throne is, and then subsequently every single time that there is a new kingdom who ends up joining the world government, their king or queen has to come and, each time that there's a new line or something like that, they have to make that same promise. We saw that with Stelly at this past reverie, where Stelly had to, swear essentially loyalty to the world government. And so we kind of have that there. So it's like those are kind of promises that have been carried on since the Void Century. Whether or not Lily actually made those promises a bit left up for debate. So we're not exactly sure about that. But the other 19 families did. And so there's like that kind of promise there. So possibly there was a promise made between Emu, Emu Neurona, and the, and Davy Jones or Joy Boy, whichever, that there was a promise made there, and that Rox knows that there was this promise that was made. And, so it's like that type of a thing. Or maybe Rox is just like referring to the fact that he told, Emu that he would be back, and then now they're interacting again, however many years later. And maybe it's involving that. I don't know. But Emu is not happy about this, and he's like, this is precisely why you wretched ilk must be expunged from the annals of history, So, obviously is something that, like, we have seen throughout the course of One Piece as we learn about different, Shandora, the city of gold, was a myth, and then it's proved that no, it was real. Nolan wasn't lying. It was real. It's up in Skypiea now. It was shot up by the knockoff stream or by the ancient weapon type of thing. So there's that, 400 some years ago. And then there's a few other cases where it's just like, well, what about these other lost areas or something like that, where it's just like another island that was like lost to history. Like maybe it had one name at one point in time and then now it has a different name because like God Valley has just up and vanished. That's pretty much confirmed. Same thing with Lelucia. It got sky cannoned out of existence, so it's gone. But it's like the question of like, and like possibly whatever was originally where Enies Lobby is may have been the same thing that happened with Lelucia. And then there's a few other places where that still kind of falls. As to is that island gone? Was that island just abandoned at some point in time because of what happened with like the human hunting contest? And then eventually like the government had like stripped the country of any useful materials, and then they just abandoned the island. And then eventually someone, they just abandoned it and like just didn't have it on the maps or anything, and then somebody else found it. We also know that after O'Hara was destroyed, after it was Buster called, the island was still physically there, but in any new printed history books, O'Hara was erased. And then we saw in like Robin's little flashback how she was like drawing in O'Hara where it used to be. So in this case, Emu is just like, there's these annoying little pests keep somehow cropping up in history. They keep popping up, and I keep having to find ways to squash them. And that's kind of like, Emu's angry at this point in time. And we see him like raising up his leg and getting ready to stab Rocks, and he's just like, Moo's world, and then remains incomplete, and he's like stabbing at Rocks, and Rocks like slices off the leg, the tip of the leg, which is fun. And he's like, the world ain't yours. So Emu is how he refers to himself, like, thou does not care for thy opinion, for your opinion or whatever. And Emu just kind of has, Emu's is like, there's a certain way that they want the world. Now, there's the whole question of, like, what exactly qualifies as a complete world for Emu. Emu seems to be nigh on immortal, has the ability to possess not just Gunko, but the Gorosei. Considering they're possessing Saturn now. In the present day in the story, they are possessing Gunko. There might be other ones that they are able to possess depending on what's going on. We don't know if there has to be a certain amount of like compatibility or whatever, but Emu seems to have a bunch of this ability. So it's the question of, okay, what is Emu's complete world? When would Emu view the world as complete? Would that be when it floods another, 200 centimeters or whatever, enough to like get rid of all of the other islands? It's like, if you get rid of all the other islands, where are you going to grow your food? Where are you going to have people to be able to grow your food? Marijois is not self-sustaining in that regard. The Revolutionary Army has already proved that with the fact that they have blockaded a lot of the supplies that were supposed to go to Marijois. So now that ain't happening. So there's that question. So what would be Emu's complete world at that point in time? Don't know. Rox doesn't want to find out, and it's just attacking Emu. Fair. I'd be running the other way as fast as I could in this situation, but Emu's dealing with this. So we cut back to the Marines who are kind of watching what's going on there, and it's just like, Rox, that crazy bastard, he's going after St. Saturn. And I was like, what now, Rear Admirals? Should we provide backup? Well, and Garp's like, damn right we should. Move it. It's like, Vice Admiral Garp. So it's like, wait, who exactly are we backing up? And Garp just has this like expression on his face where he's like, oh yay, I get to punch someone who I'm not normally allowed to punch, and I can try to find a way to get around it. It's like the look on his face. So now we cut to where we have a bunch of the pirates. These are a bunch of the members of the Rocks, or not the Rocks Pirates, of the Roger Pirates, and we have like the Marines are trying to fire at them to like stop them. I'm just like, the pirates are taking the treasure, stop them, those are world-renowned items. It's like, yeah, that were stolen by the God's Knights or the CP0 or whatever, and that don't actually belong to the world government. So we have them all running, and like one of the guys has like a chariot that they're pulling a bunch of the treasure on, which is just funny. And then we cut to where we have Captain John, who is, we've seen him before. He's drunk. And he's like, things are getting pretty crazy. Glug. How's the transport situation looking? It's just like, we're ready to go, Captain John. So they've gotten a hold of like some other chariots and stuff like that. So John is just like, then this is goodbye, Rocks Pirates. So we, of course, have been told that God Valley is, of course, where the Rocks Pirates fall apart, where they end up disbanding. So we have that going on here. We're seeing that here. We're seeing them kind of tearing each other apart from the inside. Whitebeard stood beside Rocks in trying to fight against Emu. And we have it that Kaido kind of is, well, flying with them, but standing with them as well. But Kaido's more doing it probably out of like, okay, I've got this new Devil Fruit ability. I'm an effing dragon. Maybe there's, what can I do at the moment? How strong am I now? And like Kaido is not going to be anywhere near on the same level that he is, or that he was when he fought against the Scabbards and the Supernovas and Yamato and Luffy. That Kaido is not around yet. That Kaido has not built up that stamina, that training, all of those skills and everything else like that. Like, we're going to see Kaido use a Boro Breath later in this chapter, but he doesn't even know what he's going to call it yet. So John is like getting ready to do something. And this here will confirm one of the theories that we kind of had from a couple of chapters ago. Because a couple of chapters ago, at one point in time, because we have seen John physically. We have seen his corpse, and we have seen him in this flashback. And in none of those time frames did we see him have any type of metal modifications. Whereas a couple of chapters ago, when we were getting another, entrance of the Rocks Pirates, John had a metal arm. And we're like, whoa, wait a second. That's not... He didn't have that before. His corpse didn't have it. We've seen his corpse. We've seen both arms of his corpse, and they were fine. And we've seen, all of that stuff. So it's just like, okay, well, that's not it. So we're like, okay. So he must have the same devil fruit that Kid has, which is going to get confirmed here in a second. So we see Dragon, and he is running with little baby Shanks. What is about to happen here is going to confirm that this is most definitely Shanks. Running with Shanks in his arms. Shanks is crying again. One of the things that, of course, kept getting pointed out is that, like, when Dragon had both twins, they were not crying. As soon as they were separated, that's when they both started crying. Maffy got a hold of Shamrock at this point in time, got hold of him and took him away, and he was crying. Shanks got knocked out, but then once Shanks woke up again, he was crying. Because it's like this whole thing of like, okay, where did my twin go? Where did my brother go? Where is Shamrock? Where is Shanks? So that's kind of what's going on there. Now, in my experience, I have not been around that many twins. I have one set of twin cousins on my mother's side. And other than that, I haven't really been around that many twins. We have a set of triplets at church who I have watched grow up. But besides that, that's about it. And it's not like I was around them enough on like a daily or weekly basis to be able to be like, oh yeah, they are like that. If they are separated, they cry. But that makes sense. It's this other presence that's always around you. So if it's not there, something's wrong. Is kind of the concept there. So Dragon is running. He's like, what's going on? What was that terrible shriek? So Dragon is hearing in the distance stuff that is like, Emu and Rocks fighting against each other, someone else who may be getting killed, different things like that. And he's running and he sees this marine ship in the distance. He's like, oh, a Navy ship. I'll have them take the kid. So he's running and running and running, trying to get there. And then he has his gun still strapped to his back. And then we see him literally just get jerked backwards. And he's like, what the? So he gets jerked backwards, is sent flying, as is pretty much any other piece of metal that is within a certain range. So this confirms the theory that came up a couple of weeks ago that Captain John, has the Jiki no Mi, that has the magnet fruit that Kid has. And so it's like that type. So he has that same devil fruit. We see, Dragon gets jerked back into the sky. We see a bunch of other pirates whose treasure is literally flying out of their hands. And it's not just their treasure, it's their swords and guns and stuff like that as well. It's their weaponry is getting pulled away. It's just like, oh, the treasure, what? Like, they're confused about it. Scopper's axe is trying to, like, be pulled away from him. So he's holding on to that nice and tight. And he's just like, our metals are reacting to something. just like, don't let go. So we see that. And then we see John going, big eater. And he's like, to me, my treasure. And we get like this double page spread that has him standing there with like all of the treasure just flying toward him, along with a few other people who are being grabbed onto because they have metal on them. We see another Marine whose gun is strapped to his back, so he's getting pulled this way. Another pirate is like had his like sword and stuff like that, so they're getting pulled toward him. And then we have John. It's got to be Captain John's magnet power. It's causing a strong magnetic pull to the valley's southeast entrance. So it's just like all of the metal and stuff is just being pulled to that area. And we see Roger trying to deal with this, and he's just like, do whatever you want. Just get out of the way. So he's running. Now we see Gonzui, and we're going to get a confirmation of well, not because we didn't really have a theory as to where this devil fruit came from, but we're going to get a confirmation here as to another devil fruit that we have interacted with in the story. Obviously, the Jiki Jiki no Mi is Kid's devil fruit, and now we're going to find out who at least a prior user of the Bamu Bamu no Mi was, or the Bomb Bomb fruit, and that is going to be Gonzui. So Gonzui is essentially like that John, that snake, and he has pulled a booger out of his nose, because apparently that is the only way that people can think of to actually use this devil fruit, is to use boogers, which is disgusting. Has pulled a booger out of his nose, and he flicks it at where John is, and he's like, Sky Snake Red Cannon, and he flicks the booger at John, and then it just explodes. So this devil fruit, the Bamu Bamu no Mi, or the Bomb Bomb fruit, is the same devil fruit that Mr. 5 from Baroque Works has, or Gem of the Border is his name. And it is the same devil fruit that he has. We met him way back on Whiskey Peak, and I believe the last canonical time that we saw him, I believe, was in the Mrs. Golden Week's Meet Baroque cover story, I believe, was the last time that we saw him. And he got his dream fulfilled being a fireman, I guess. So this confirms at least that Gonzui had this devil fruit. I don't even know if that was a theory out there, since we'd never seen him use anything like it, but we get this huge explosion that I think is far bigger than anything that Mr. 5 ever did. But Gonzui might just also be stronger, is probably might be. I'm pretty sure Gonzui is quite a bit stronger than Mr. 5 has ever been in the story. And we just see John just like covered in smoke and like as he's like falling down, and his men are like, Captain John. So that's happened. We see Dragon, because we see a bunch of the metal that was flying toward where John was. John has been knocked out, so the metal is now falling. And that includes Dragon, who is falling, and he like tries to cushion it so that way Baby Shanks doesn't get hurt. And then we cut back to where we have Gonzui, and Shiki has shown up and lecturing guys. She's like, hey, Gonzui, why'd you attack John? And then Gonzui's like, you really think that he'd split all that loot with us? Aren't each of these treasure chests worth at least $1 billion? And Shiki just, billion? Okay. And then John just like, Gonzui turns around, has another booger, and is all ready, and he flicks it at Shiki, and he's just like, can't blame anyone for wanting to hog it all, really. And he flicks it at Shiki, and then Shiki gets blown up, which is just hilarious. And now we get back to Garp, who is running as fast as he can, trying so he can try to get to where Saturn is, because he wants to fight. He wants to fight Roger and probably Rox. But he also just wants to have an excuse to go and punch Saturn, which is, I don't blame him in the slightest, is what he's doing, is where he's headed. And like all the Marines are trying to like hold Garp back, which is hilarious. We do not see, Bogart here, but that is just hilarious. Bogart's probably off doing something else, but like, what's going on here? It's just like, you can't Vice Admiral. That's one of the world's overseers. It looks like a pest to me. Garp's like, I'm gonna go punch the giant spider. Which is just funny. So that's where he's aiming. We cut back to where we have Rox and Emu Saturn fighting, and we see Kaido and Whitebeard are there as well. And he's just like, save something for me. Rox is like what Kaido's asking, and then we hear a scream of, Kaido, you damn brat! And we cut and we see, so Kaido kind of looks over his shoulder, and we see Big Mom just flying towards him with Prometheus. She's on Zeus, and she has Napoleon in her hands, ready to attack Kaido. And she's also like, I'll kill you. She's flying toward him. And then Kaido's like, you jealous? Check this out. And he's like getting ready to, he's like powering up like a Boro breath. And then Whitebeard's getting his attack ready. And then we see Rox, who's getting his attack ready. And then we have Roger is also getting his attack ready. And Roger is just like, this is my chance. This is my catch, Garp. And then Garp's got Galaxy. And then we get this great full double page, not just like panels or anything, but full double page spread that looks freaking awesome. And it is all of these so powerful characters' attacks are all hitting Emu Saturn at the same time. We have Garp getting a Galaxy Impact in there. We got a Roger getting a Divine Departure, Kamusari. We have Rox is using Pandemonium of the Abyss, which is just a fucking cool name, no argument here. That is like, it's kind of like the kanji is like Curse of the Abyss, which is funny because of course the Abyss is what the God's Knights and the Gorosei use to teleport and get around and everything. So we have that. We have Whitebeard is using Shattering Void, using his Quake fruit on them. We have Big Mom is using Ikoku Sovereignty, which is one of the various attacks that we've seen her use. And then Kaido is using Dragon. He has no idea what to call it yet. He hasn't figured out to call it Boro Breath yet. So he's using that attack. And all of these are just hitting Emu Saturn just dead center, which is very satisfying, but isn't going to last long, unfortunately. And Emu Saturn kind of thing kind of pops, and this must be at least enough damage for him to lose some amount of concentration. But then it also just results in a huge amount of just like the black lightning hockey getting released and just like firing off all over the island. And we see a ton of the lower ranked Marines just falling over, passing out from what's going on. Just passing out. And probably some of the other pirates are also passing out as well. So we have a bunch of we see several other members of, I believe, the Roger Pirates. I was just like, what was that? Is this the start of Armageddon or something? Not yet. Like another 38 years before that happens. And it's just like, and we have Rayleigh still carrying Shocky, is like, look alive, the treasure flew all over the place, pick it up. And it's just like, don't you ever miss it, don't ever miss a beat, do you, really? So they're all getting ready. There's someone here, so I don't know, because I know that we have been given names and sketch art / drawings of all of the members of the Roger Pirates who were on the crew when they were at Laugh Tale, which was like the final version of Roger's crew, which includes Odin and Shanks and Buggy and all of that, and Crocus and all of that stuff. All the ones who made it to Laugh Tale, plus Shanks and Buggy. A couple of these guys do not look like we've seen them before on the Roger Pirates, but they're taking orders from Rayleigh. And there's one that kind of looks like he has bat wings, so I don't know what's going on with that. And it's just like a pirate's priorities never waver. So like they're getting, they're gathering up the treasure. We cut to where we see Dragon, who is lying on the ground. He still like has his arms wrapped around. It's revealed it's going to be a stump in a second, but he has his arms still wrapped around something, and because he was trying to keep Baby Shanks safe. And what ends up happening is he's like, that was intense. And he's like, is the baby? And he realizes that the baby is not in his arms anymore. Now he just has like a stump in his arms. How Shanks got swapped with a stump, I will never know. But Dragon isn't passed out. He's also still been, hyper beamed through the chest. So he's still gotten a good bit of damage, but he's not dead. And it's the whole thing of like, well, we know Dragon doesn't die here because Luffy isn't born yet. So Dragon can't die, type of a thing. And he's like, what? Like trying to figure out where the baby is. He's like, where did he go? And then we see little Shanks just crawling like, just like crawling around. And he crawls toward a treasure chest. And we see him like just crawling toward it and like crawling inside of it. Now, we know that the Roger Pirates find Shanks in a treasure chest as a baby after God Valley. It's one of the treasure chests that they end up picking up, and it ends up on the ship, and then they hear one of the chests making noises. Once they're sailing away, they open up the chest, and they find baby Shanks, who they then proceed to raise. I've seen some adorable fan art of like, well, what if Shamrock had somehow ended up in another treasure chest and they ended up with both of them? And I'm like, well, that would have been fun. So, but this image here did remind me of something else that we have seen in the series, and it is back during Doflamingo's flashback. We have it that, of course, Doflamingo and Homing and Rocinante and their mother all end up, they leave Marijua because, Homing renounces himself as a celestial dragon. He takes his wife and sons down to the lower realm, and they move to some place in the North Blue. Once they're there and they're, moving into their nice big mansion, they're all just kind of talking. And one of the things that we see is like Rocinante just kind of ends up going over to one of the chests, and it's just kind of like looking at the toys, the stuff in the chest, which is just filled with like gold and jewels and everything, like they're toys. Because to him, gold is just this thing that's like gold and jewels and whatever, and other precious gems and metals and everything are just like, it's just whatever we have. We get whatever we want. And it's just this random chest. Shanks is kind of looking at this like, ooh, sparkly things, and like crawling toward them and like crawling inside of them. So, crawling inside of the chest. So that's just how he ended up in the chest. Nobody put Shanks in the chest. That was kind of one of the thoughts that we had about like, did the dragon put Shanks in the chest? Or did he like put Shanks in a chest and take out the devil fruit and eat the devil fruit and put Shanks there? Or what? We're not sure. We weren't sure. Nope, Shanks just crawled in there on his own. And then we see like the, emu is like slowly reforming. And it's just like, Kaido and Big Mom are arguing with each other, which is just funny. It's just like, it's too late to throw it up. And she's like, then pay me back. Which is probably like that's where that comes from for much later on. That she's like, you owe me, Kaido. So Emu is like trying to reform, and it's just like, there they are, far away in the forest running. Click, as he's like putting himself back together. And Garp is just like, ha ha ha, my one attack was all it took. And Roger is just like, no way, it was all me. So they're all arguing with each other. Rox is still paying attention as to what is going on here. Rox is just like, don't tell me your... And Rox realizes that Emu is focusing on Eris and Teach. And he's just like, and Rox is just like, Emu is like, a new branch of the Davy clan, the woman and her child, frantically trying to survive. Such dangerous lives must not be set loose. So Rox attacks and like slices Emu into like 3 pieces, which is funny. He's like, stop it. What are you trying to do? And Garp is just kind of watching what's going on here. He's like, what is going on? As he's like watching Emu like get sliced up. Not that Garp knows who Emu is, but he's watching Emu get sliced up by Rox. And Emu is still talking, and like, it will not be Mu who acts, and he has like stabbed through Rox with like 2 of his tendrils, and Rox is like, what is this? It doesn't hurt or even itch. And Emu is just like, thou shall be the one to exterminate them. Go forth and slay your wife and child. And Rox is just like, that's absurd. What are you talking about? And like, we just get like this like image for like how high up Rox is right now as being stabbed by Emu compared to like where the others are on the ground, with like how big Saturn is right now, and like Emu making it even taller. And it's Domi Reversi. And like Garp, Dragon, or Garp, um, Roger, Whitebeard, and Big Mom are all looking up at this. And like Kaido is like there too, but he's like off to the side, but we don't see him here. But they're all looking up at this and they're all like, what the fuck is going on? I did not sign up for this today. So we're like, I just came here to rescue Shaki. Listen, I came here to find devil fruits for my kids. Garp, I came to fight rocks. Or to fight Roger. This is not why I was here. What is going on? It's like they're all looking up at this. And we have the Domi Reversi. And we cut to the last two panels where we have Rocks on one side and Eris and Teach on the other. And Rocks is going through the Domi Reversi transformation. His canines are elongating into fangs, and he is probably going to be getting like the demon horns and the bat wings and stuff like that, like we saw with the other Davy clan members in the previous chapter with his mom and his grandma and his dad. And we're going to see that probably in the next chapter with like Rocks going into that form, that Domi Reversi form, which a lot of us were thinking was going to end up happening anyway, because it's just like, with as dedicated as Rocks is to his wife and son, like he would do what he, like if he survived, he would try to find a way back to them. Like he knew that they were going to go to Lelucia, which just brings up a whole other amount of questions, but he knew that they would end up in Lelucia. And it's like this whole question of like, well, then what happened with Rocks? And of course, going into this flashback, when we first hear about Rocks from Sengoku, he's just kind of described as just like a crazy guy, as just like this guy who wanted to rule the world and become king of the world and everything else like that. And then throughout the course of these chapters, we have seen that Rocks has ambition, no argument there. But he's not this crazy, yeah, of course he still stabbed a child, and he's not like the kindest of men, or, but he's definitely, he cares about his wife and son, and he, to a degree, I would say that he cares about his crew, to a degree. Some of them care about each other as well. I'd say Whitebeard kind of, got along with some of them a bit better and stuff like that. So there's like that question there. For how all of that pans out. But there's also the question of, okay, well, what's going to happen here? Because as we have seen on Elbath, we saw that, Dory and Bragi and the other giants, a bunch of the other members of the Giant Warrior Pirates, they got Domi Reversi. And we don't know how to fix that yet. What happens here may be something that then informs us of like a way that Luffy and the others might be able to, reverse or defeat those who have been Domi Reversi'd. Now, it's kind of confirmed that Rocks probably ended up slaughtering the members of the Davy clan that had gotten Domi Reversi'd, in order to try to give Eris and Teach more time to escape. He probably slaughtered them. That was kind of confirmed in the last chapter. He didn't want to, but he did. And he probably was just like, I know that my father and my grandmother and my other family members who are here, who are other members of the Davy clan, I know that they would not want to be stuck in this fate, and know that they ended up hurting people who were innocent and family and everything else like that. So I will take on that burden by being the one to end their lives and end their suffering in that regard. Because clearly from what we've seen with Dory and Bragi and the other giants that got Domi Reversi'd, and here, you are not in your right mind when you are Domi Reversi'd. You are literally like, oh, now you're evil. And you're just set on destruction. So Imu's intention here is to just literally Domi Reversi Rocks, which is happening, since being a Davy clan member or having the will of D does not, prevent you from being Domi Reversi'd. And what ends up happening, what could happen, the intention here from Imu's perspective is to have Rocks probably defeat the others that are in front of him, and then send Rocks after his wife and son and end them that way. And then essentially it is very similar to, so and this is kind of on my brain because I was discussing Greek mythology with my mother last night, because I randomly bring that into conversations. Um, Thinking a video. I can explain that, Mom. I don't need it, but sure. Um, so in Greek mythology, there is, of course, Hercules or Heracles. And what ends up happening is the way that Hercules ends up getting sent on his original course for all of his tasks that he has to do is that he is, he is married to his lovely wife and they have children. And then he is visited upon, Hera visited, Hera sends madness upon Hercules as punishment because she can't punish Zeus, so she's going to punish the kid. So she sends, madness upon Hercules. She, visits madness upon him. And he goes crazy. And when he comes to, his wife and children have been slaughtered by his own hands. And whether or not he knows Hera made him do this he probably knows it was her. And he ends up going to the Oracle of Delphi, and the Oracle of Delphi ends up getting possessed by Hera, who basically has it be that, it's like, you must do these 10 to 12 tasks, depending on whatever, and, they will be determined for you by your cousin, who is the king of whatever. And so Hercules goes through that mission. So essentially what is happening here, and this is something that I probably should have figured out a bit earlier when it comes to the way that Domi Reversi is, and for the way that we have seen it with Dory and Bragi, and now we're going to probably see it with Rox in the next chapter, is even like you get this madness put upon you and you can't really fight against it. You are powered up. You are just, the world has just been twisted around you at that point in time, because we don't know from their perspective what they are seeing necessarily. That would be an interesting thing to see, in either from Rox's perspective or from the perspective of Dorian Bragi or one of the other giants that we have seen that have been Domi Reversi'd on Elbaf. It would be very interesting to see whether or not, like for them, it's like their moral compass is essentially switched. And they're just powered up, moral compass switched from, oh, these are my friends and my family and my people, to these are my enemies and I will defeat them, type of a thing. Kind of similar to one of the Bonkai and Bleach, that can like swap everybody's loyalties when they're activated. So there's kind of that thought there that's like, Emu is like visiting madness upon Rox and then like just powering him up as well, and then it's just going to like put him in a direction and just send Rox after Eris and Teach, who we see running away here. But it's also, we've got Garp, we've got Roger, we've got Big Mom, we've got Kaido, we've got Whitebeard, all here, who are pretty good forces in their own right. And maybe they will be able to figure out that, okay, definitely something bad happened here to Rox. This is not the way our captain, or this is not the way Rox acts. This thing did something to him. And then there's the whole question of Garp knows about that this is somehow Saturn or related to Saturn and everything else like that. So, and now Garp is one of the other ones who is like, has seen Emu, but doesn't quite know who Emu is. So there's this question of like, how much, like, because there's been this question of like, well, if Garp knew about this stuff, why did he allow it to happen? And like, why would he allow this stuff to continue to happen and still be a Marine? And Garp freaking attacked Emu. Technically, he was attacking Saturn, but it ended up being attacking Emu. So, by a technicality, why is Garp still alive? Beyond, obviously, story purposes. But my thought is that, okay, because the story that is fed to the rest of the world, or at least to the Marines and Sengoku, is that Rox attacks God Valley. And Roger and Garp both happen to be there. They then end up teaming up and fighting against Rox together and taking Rox down. The crew, Rock's crew, is then is dissolved. They all go their separate ways. Some of them possibly die. Rox dies, and then the world government, the Marines, needs someone that they can place as the hero here. And Garp is like, okay. Garp probably didn't want it, and this whole interaction here is probably the reason why he doesn't want it, because he has seen what the Gorosei are, because he has seen how the Celestial Dragons react. He's just like, I can't leave the Marines. I have, kind of the way that Sakazuki is. It's just like, okay, I got to try to change it from the inside. And Garp is probably like, I am too far into the system to be able to do that. And a lot of people are like, this is probably where some of the origin for Sword comes from. And why people think like, well, maybe Garp and Sengoku and Tsuru were some of the, ones who like kind of started Sword. And then like Kobe and his group, his generation, Kobe, Drake, all of them, they are the ones who actually are going to be able to make changes from the inside. And even like Smoker and Tashigi get thrown in there as well. Now, we haven't seen Smoker or Tashigi interact with any of the Celestial Dragons. And even Fujitora falls into that category as someone who would want to make change from within. And doesn't care if a couple of Celestial Dragons have to die in order to do it. So probably what ends up happening is like after all of this battle is finished, it's like, okay, well, we need a story to feed to the public as to what happened here on God Valley. And it essentially would come down to, okay, so Rocks attacked God Valley, and Roger and Garp were there, and they ended up defeating him. The story spread to the public is that Garp is the one who took down Rocks, making him the hero of the Marines. That's where he gets his title, that title from. His Garp the Fist comes from him fighting against Qin Chao. But his hero of the Marines title comes from this, not capturing Roger, not bringing Roger in. But this moment here, where he, on God Valley, is what becomes his title of hero of the Marines. And part of that is probably because of Morgans. Morgans, spreads this information and gives Garp this title. And the government kind of is forced into a corner of, okay, I guess this is what we have to work with. And as much as they probably want to punish him for the fact that he did attack a Gorosei, he did attack one of the Gorosei, knowingly attack one of the Gorosei, they can't get rid of him. It's kind of this whole thing of like, Garp is kind of like this thorn in their side. But it's like he knows too much, so we can't let him retire and we can't fire him, type of a thing. So we can't get rid of him. And of course, we've seen the outcome of what can happen when a former high-ranking member of the Marines, Kuzan, leaves the Marines and goes off on his own, and he has joined Blackbeard. Now, to be fair, even though in one of the original versions of One Piece, Garp is a pirate and is, kind of Luffy's inspiration later on for becoming a pirate in the origin of the Straw Hat in that story, there's that theory that, like, well, what if Garp had ended up leaving the Marines? Would he have started his own pirate crew? Would he have joined one of the other pirate crews? Would he have joined Rox's not Rox's crew, but like Roger's crew or Whitebeard's crew? Would he have done that? What would have changed in that regard? Would him and Dragon be on have a better relationship? How would Luffy have been raised, type of a thing? And there is this very interesting concept there for like Garp falls into the category of wanting to try to change things from the beginning, change things from within, wants to be a hero. And the majority of the Marines, generally, I would say the majority of the Marines want to protect civilians. There are, of course, horrible Marines like Nezumi and a bunch of the other ones that are just bad Marines, bad human beings, horrible, horrible people who just do not care what pain they cause others as long as they are legally allowed to do it. To anyone who's not a world government citizen. So there's that question there of like where that lands. And I'm not sure at the moment. I am quite certain of the fact that we will eventually end up getting a bit more of like Garp's perspective as to this is what happened here. This is where this came from. And maybe this is something that we'll get either Garp when he's about to die, or we might get some other parts of a Garp flashback that might end up happening. And we'll see where that ends up all coming out in the wash, but we just haven't hit that part yet. We're getting bits of it here. And I still think there needs to be something that is a scene where we have Garp and Dragon talking. Just talking. We don't need them coming to blows or anything like that, but just talking. And that would be a really good thing. That would be just like this thing where it's just like Dragon confronting Garp about everything, and then Garp telling Dragon it was just like, well, I was trying to make things better from the inside and it didn't work. And then like some point later on we have this moment where like Garp and Dragon end up meeting again. You know, either Dragon tries to save Garp or whatever ends up happening. Because, and this is something that I keep wanting to bring up in a video and I keep forgetting. So Dragon has the line that a parent's greatest weakness is their child. And for the majority of parents that we see in One Piece, I would have to agree with that. For Bellemere, her weakness is Nami and Nojiko. For, you know, a bunch of the other Straw Hats, in some cases, yes, their children are their weakness. And a bunch of other characters throughout the story, yes, their child is their weakness, is their weak point. And for Dragon, it's Luffy is his weak point. But the flip side of that is that Dragon is Garp's weak point, which is one of the other reasons why Dragon, when he started leading the freedom fighters and everything, he wasn't going around boasting about being, I am Monkey D. Dragon, I am the son of the hero of the Marines, and I am the leader of the Revolutionary Army. No, he didn't do that. Because that would just put another target on his back, because anyone who would have a vendetta against Dragon, or against Garp, would then go after Dragon. And that was not something that he needed to deal with at that point in time while he's trying to build up this revolutionary army, build up the freedom fighters. So there's that whole thing there. And like by extension, Garp's weaknesses are Dragon and Luffy and Ace. We saw that at Marineford. And I'm quite certain that Garp lives with that regret every single day that he wasn't able to, that he couldn't bring himself to try to protect his own grandson. And this is something that I did not mention yet in this video, and haven't mentioned in a video this yet, or this at the moment, but earlier this week, Monday actually, my grandfather passed away. He was 94, and he had a very full life, as he put it, but he passed away. And that happening leading up to the wedding has been a lot of ups and downs and emotional and everything like that. So I'm actually kind of glad that this chapter was not one that has a ton of like emotional of like, oh God, pulling at your heartstrings. Because I am on like a hair trigger right now for sad crying or happy crying, depending on which way you want to put it. So I am like very like, you don't want to know where I am on that one. At work I kept getting the question of how are you, and I'm like, you really don't want the answer to that question right now. So there's that whole concept there. But Garp loves Luffy, and he loved Ace, and he loves Dragon, and he loves Sabo, but there are weak points for him. And Dragon has weak points in Luffy and in Sabo. And you don't really know about Ace, but he knew about Luffy. You know, he knows about Luffy and everything. And we see that. We see that very much throughout the course of the series, that a child is, for a good parent, is their weak point. That's what happens. That's the whole thing that brings down Whitebeard. Big Mom, on the other hand, her children are her weak point because she really only views them as like a useful thing for the crew. And if they're not useful to her in some way or some shape or form, once they're no longer cute to look at and they don't find a way to make themselves useful, she just ships them off or tries to put them into some marriage or whatever, like she did with Chiffon and Lola and wanted to do with Lola. Same, and with Praline and everything. So there's that whole thing there. But I covered what I wanted to for this chapter. Big life events happening in my life this week, in the next couple of days. But that's what I have there. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Again, this probably won't be up until sometime in the evening, but bye.